I still remember the way Ryan laughed in my face that night. It wasn't just a laugh, it was sharp, cruel, and meant to cut. If it weren't for me, you'd still be living in that rundown apartment, broke and useless. You should be kissing my feet for saving you, Hannah. So shut up and be grateful. His words didn't stop there. He made sure I knew about Melissa too, the woman he had been seeing behind my back for months, maybe even years. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. For a moment, I thought I would cry. I thought I would scream, throw something, or collapse the way I used to when his words became too heavy to bear. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, feeling strangely empty, as if something inside me had quietly shut down. And then it hit me. Maybe I was done caring. Maybe the woman who once worshipped every word he said had already died a long time ago. The next morning, I woke up with the sun pouring through the curtains, the faint sound of gulls calling outside our home in Tampa. Ryan was already gone, probably out showing off to his friends about the perfect life he had, me included at least in his mind. I looked around at the spotless, curated home he controlled like a showroom and realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. This wasn't a home. This was a golden cage, and I had been living in it for 6 long years. I used to dream of becoming a makeup artist. I loved working with colors, textures, the art of helping people see themselves in a new light. But Ryan shut that dream down on day 1 of our marriage. No wife of mine is going to waste time painting strangers' faces, he said, tearing up the enrollment form for a class I'd saved for months to afford. He claimed he was protecting me from low-class work, but really he wanted control. And I let him have it, thinking it was love. 6 years of schedules, 6 years of following his rules about what to wear, what to cook, who to talk to. 6 years of keeping my voice low and my head down to avoid the anger that flared whenever I dared to question him. Friends stopped calling after the awkward dinners where Ryan openly criticized me in front of them. My world grew smaller and smaller until it was just him and me, hiding pieces of who I used to be. But something changed that night when he laughed. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I was nothing more than another piece of furniture he owned. Or maybe it was the way he smirked when he said Melissa's name, like daring me to react. Whatever it was, something inside me quietly shifted. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I simply let the silence stretch between us like a wall I would never climb again. And I had no idea then that by the next morning, everything would start to unravel for both of us. My name is Hannah Mitchell, and for a long time, I thought my life was good enough. I had a husband with a successful business, a house near the bay in Tampa, a car I didn't have to pay for, and vacations Ryan liked to brag about at every dinner party. People would look at us and think we were perfect, but no one ever saw what was behind closed doors. Ryan had a way of making everything sound like it was for my own good. When we first married, I told him I wanted to keep working as a makeup artist to build something of my own. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Sweetheart, you don't need to work. I'll take care of everything. Focus on our home, on me." It sounded loving at the time until I realized what it really meant. My dreams didn't matter. He made the rules and I followed them, thinking that was what marriage was supposed to be. What I wore, what I cooked, how I spoke when we were around as friends. It all had to fit his vision of the perfect wife. If I bought something he didn't approve of, he'd take it back to the store without even asking. If I cooked something twice in a week, he'd push the plate away and say, "Do I look like someone who eats on repeat? Be creative, Hannah. Don't embarrass me." At first, I tried. I read cookbooks late at night, learned new recipes, styled my hair the way he liked, even avoided wearing clothes that reminded him of my small-town roots. But every effort I made just opened the door for a new complaint. I could see it in his eyes. Nothing I did was ever enough. My friends stopped coming around after a while. Ryan had a way of turning every social gathering into a performance where he played the charming husband and I played the silent, smiling wife. If I spoke too much, he'd give me that look and I'd shrink back in my chair. After one particularly awkward night where he openly corrected me 3 times in front of everyone, One of my closest friends pulled me aside and whispered, "Hannah, are you okay?" I smiled and lied, "Of course I'm fine." But I wasn't. 6 years of that chipped away at me. I woke up every morning already tired, like I was bracing for something to go wrong. Sometimes it was small, like him sighing at how I folded his shirts. Sometimes it was big, like him throwing away the old makeup kit I kept for memories, saying, "You're not going back to that nonsense." Every time, I told myself it was easier to stay quiet to keep the peace. But the truth was, I wasn't keeping peace. I was just disappearing, piece by piece, year after year. And the night he laughed in my face, the night he flaunted Melissa like a trophy, I realized just how far I'd fallen. I wasn't the woman I used to be, the one who loved color, creativity, and laughter. I had become a ghost in my own life, and for the first time in years, I was angry about it. I didn't know what to do with that anger yet, but I knew it was the start of something. Something I wasn't ready to name, but would soon change everything. The day before our trip was supposed to be exciting. Ryan had booked a week at one of the most expensive resorts in the Florida Keys, a place so exclusive you needed connections just to get on the waiting list. He strutted around the house all morning, phone in one hand, barking orders to employees while I tried to finish packing. I had spent the morning roasting a herb-seasoned chicken, one of his usual favorites. When he walked into the kitchen, he wrinkled his nose like I'd left garbage on the counter. "Again with the chicken, Hannah? Third time this week. Do I have to remind you I like variety? Do better." I bit my lip, counted to 3 in my head, and forced a smile. "I thought you liked that recipe." "I did. Past tense. Now it's boring. Just like the wardrobe you're packing, I bet." He peered at the suitcase on the chair. "You didn't fill it with those small-town rags again, did you? We're staying at a 5-star resort, not visiting your grandma's farm." He pulled out one of my favorite sundresses, a soft yellow one my late grandmother had helped me sew when I was in high school. I reached for it instinctively. "That's special to me, Ryan." "Please don't. Special? It looks cheap." He tossed it onto the bed like it was trash. "We'll buy you something appropriate when we get there. This isn't some budget motel vacation, Hannah. Try to look the part." I turned away, swallowing the sting in my chest. It wasn't new. He'd been erasing pieces of my life like this for years. But that day, it hit me differently. I thought about how he'd laughed at me the night before and wondered why I still cared what he thought of my clothes. Later that evening, as I tidied up the kitchen, his phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, he kept it glued to his hand. I would have ignored it, but the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize at first, Melissa Gray. And then it clicked. He came back in before I could even process it, scooping up the phone and answering with a smile I hadn't seen in years. Soft, warm, intimate. "Yeah, babe, of course. We'll make it work." "A whole week?" "No problem. She doesn't suspect a thing." He walked into his office, leaving the door cracked just enough for me to hear him laugh. "I can't wait to see you, Melissa." My stomach dropped, but there were no tears, no outburst. Instead, I stood there, frozen, a strange calm settling over me. He'd been cheating. I had suspected it for months, maybe longer, but hearing it, it was different. For a moment, I wondered if I should storm and confront him, demand answers. But instead, I found myself silently folding that yellow sundress back into my suitcase. I wasn't sure why, but I knew I wanted to take it with me. Maybe as a reminder that I still had a piece of myself he hadn't destroyed yet. That night, as he double-checked my suitcase, actually pulling items out and criticizing my choices, something inside me shifted again. I wasn't afraid of him like I used to be. I was tired, and somewhere in that exhaustion was the tiniest flicker of resolve. I didn't know it then, but that flicker would change everything. The Florida Keys shimmered like a painting as we landed. Warm, salty air rushed toward me the moment we stepped out of the car at the resort entrance. Towering palm trees swayed above an infinity pool that seemed to melt into the turquoise ocean beyond. It was paradise, the kind you saw on postcards. except I didn't feel like I belonged in it. Ryan walked beside me like he owned the place, tossing the valet his keys with a careless flick of his wrist. "Hurry with the bags," he said to no one in particular before adjusting his sunglasses and looking at me. "Try to keep up, Hannah. We don't want you looking lost." We checked into a suite so luxurious it almost felt unreal. Marble floors, a balcony overlooking the ocean, a whirlpool tub big enough for 4 people. Ryan grinned at his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. "See, this is the life you get because of me. You're welcome." He barely glanced at me before announcing, "I've got a business meeting tonight, networking with one of my clients who happens to be here. Order room service or something. Don't wait up." And just like that, he was gone. I stood alone in the silent room, staring at the untouched bed and the suitcase I'd carefully packed. On top of it lay the yellow sundress I had insisted on bringing, no matter what he said. I hesitated only a moment before slipping it on. The fabric, soft and familiar, hugged me like an old friend. For the first time in years, I pulled out my makeup bag, the small one I had hidden from Ryan's constant comments about wasting time on vanity. My hands trembled slightly as I applied foundation, blush, and a sweep of mascara. It felt almost rebellious, like I was doing something forbidden. But when I looked in the mirror, a woman I hadn't seen in a long time looked back. Not the quiet, muted version Ryan preferred, but someone who still had color in her life, someone who still existed. I stepped out of the suite, ignoring the voice in my head warning me about how angry Ryan would be if he found out I'd gone out alone. Tonight, I didn't care. The resort's promenade buzzed with music and laughter. Couples strolled under strings of glowing lights, and the scent of grilled seafood mixed with salt air. I wandered aimlessly, soaking it all in, when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Hey, beautiful, where you heading?" A man I didn't know stepped into my path, reeking of alcohol, his smile too wide. I froze for a moment, unsure what to do, but then another voice came, calm, authoritative. "Sir, I believe the lady said she's not interested." I turned to see a man in a crisp white shirt and tailored slacks, his dark hair neatly combed back. His presence radiated control, but not the kind Ryan wielded like a weapon. This was different, steadier. The drunk man muttered something under his breath and stumbled away. "Are you okay?" the stranger asked, his voice warm but firm. "Yes, thank you," I said, a little shaken. He smiled. "David Ramirez," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I work with the state's Department of Environmental Protection. You'd be surprised how often I have to step in on resort grounds." I shook his hand, feeling oddly safe. "I'm Hannah." "Well, Hannah, you just saved me from an awkward evening standing by the bar. May I buy you a drink to make up for startling you?" I hesitated, glancing toward the ocean, where Ryan was probably laughing over cocktails with Melissa or whoever his client really was. And then, for reasons I couldn't explain, I nodded. "Sure, 1 drink." 2 days later, Ryan finally decided to spend time with me, at least on the surface. "They're running a private tour through one of the marine sanctuaries," he said, tightening the strap on his expensive watch. "Exclusive. Only for VIPs like us." He said us like it was supposed to make me proud, but all I felt was numbness. The sanctuary was breathtaking. Stretches of pristine beach, crystal lagoons, and protected areas where endangered sea turtles nested. The guide, a woman with sun-bronzed skin and a voice full of passion, warned us right away. "This is a federal wildlife zone. Do not remove any plants, shells, or animals. Disturbing the ecosystem here is a federal offense." Ryan only half listened, fiddling with his phone and muttering about wasting time on lectures. We followed the trail as the guide pointed out nests carefully marked for protection. Tourists took pictures, whispered in awe, and even the children seemed to instinctively lower their voices in respect for this fragile environment. I breathed in the salty air, letting the peace of the place wash over me. Ryan, however, was restless. At one point, I noticed him step aside, talking in a low voice to a local man who didn't seem to be part of the tour group. Their conversation was hurried, secretive, and when Ryan noticed me looking, he waved me off with a forced smile. "Just asking for directions," he said. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The tour concluded at a scenic overlook where the guide explained how poaching had nearly wiped out entire turtle populations. "We've made progress," she said, "but one hatchling taken from this habitat can mean the loss of an entire line of life. That's why enforcement is strict, no exceptions." On the way back to the dock, security guards were waiting. "Routine bag checks," one of them announced. People sighed but complied, holding open backpacks and purses. When it was Ryan's turn, he huffed dramatically. "Seriously? Do you know who I am? I paid for VIP treatment, not this circus." "Sir, step aside," one guard said firmly. Ryan rolled his eyes and handed over his jacket. My stomach clenched when I saw the guard's expression change as he reached into the inside pocket. He pulled out a small, fabric-wrapped bundle. The guard slowly unwrapped it to reveal a hatchling, a baby sea turtle no bigger than my palm, flailing its tiny flippers in confusion. The air went dead silent. "What the hell is this?" the guard demanded. "That's not mine." Ryan snapped, his face going pale. "Someone planted it on me." But I had seen him talking to that stranger. I had seen the way he kept patting his jacket pocket the whole walk back. I knew he was lying. "You are under arrest for attempted trafficking of an endangered species," the guard said, his tone clipped and professional. "This is a felony offense." Another voice came from behind us, one I recognized instantly. "Is there a problem here?" It was David Ramirez. Only now, he wasn't just the kind stranger who bought me a drink. He was in uniform, wearing the badge of his office. And the way the other guards immediately straightened told me just how much authority he had. "Yes, sir," the guard replied. "We have a confirmed trafficking attempt. Evidence in hand." David's eyes shifted from the baby turtle to Ryan, then to me. There was recognition in his gaze, but he kept his tone official. "Take him into custody. We'll process this immediately." Ryan spun toward me, panic etched into his face. "Hannah, tell them it's a mistake. Do something." I stared at him, and for the first time in 6 years I felt nothing but a cold, quiet clarity. Ryan's face twisted in panic as the guards closed in. "Hannah, say something. Tell them it's all a misunderstanding." His voice cracked, desperate, so unlike the man who used to bark orders and laugh in my face. But I didn't move. For 6 years, I had bent under every one of his commands, silenced every objection, and buried every piece of myself to keep the peace. Now I just stood there, watching as he realized no one was coming to save him. Not even me. David Ramirez stepped forward, calm but unyielding. "Mr. Mitchell, attempted trafficking of an endangered species is a federal offense. You'll be taken to the local station for processing. You have the right to remain silent." His voice was professional, steady, but his eyes met mine briefly, as if to say, "You're safe now." Ryan tried again, his voice dropping to a pleading whisper. "Hannah, please. You don't understand what they'll do to me. There's a fine, or worse, public lashes." "I can't, Hannah, I can't handle that. You have to help me." I should have felt something. Anger, satisfaction, pity, but all I felt was a strange emptiness. The woman who used to cry over his every insult wasn't standing there anymore. At the station later, David approached me in a quiet hallway. "Your husband is facing serious charges," he said gently. "But there's something you should know. We've been building a case against a trafficking ring for months. He's connected to people we've been trying to shut down." My chest tightened. "You mean this wasn't the first time?" David nodded. "From what we can tell, he's done this before. We need someone who can help us close this case, someone close enough to know how he works." He paused, studying my expression. "I know you've been through enough already, but if you're willing, your cooperation could make a difference, not just for the investigation, but for you." We can push for a lesser penalty, a fine instead of public punishment, and lifetime ban from the sanctuary instead of prison. You'd also have the legal ground to separate from him cleanly. It was a lot to process. Part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from Ryan and his mess as possible. But another part of me, the part that had been silent for years, spoke up. This is your chance. Not just to leave him, but to take your life back. What would I need to do? I asked quietly. David explained. Testimony, signed statements, a willingness to be part of a public campaign raising awareness about illegal wildlife trade. It's not about humiliating him. It's about protecting something bigger than both of you. I looked down at my hands, the faint scent of salt water still clinging to my skin. 6 years of control, insults, and betrayal, and now I had the power to decide his future. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. I'll do it. I'll cooperate. And I'm filing for divorce. David gave a small nod, not triumphant, but respectful. Good. I'll have someone connect you with an attorney we trust. Hannah, this doesn't have to define you. It can be the beginning of something else. For the first time in years, I believed that. And somewhere deep down, under all the exhaustion and pain, a spark of something warm flickered. Hope. The weeks that followed felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Ryan was charged with illegal trafficking of endangered wildlife. His lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was undeniable. Messages on his phone, bank transfers linked to known poachers, and my sworn statement confirming what I'd overheard before our trip. The deal David had arranged went through. Instead of facing a public punishment that would have been broadcast on every news outlet, Ryan paid a massive fine, was banned for life from the Florida Keys, and left with a criminal record that would shadow him forever. When the gavel came down in that courtroom, I didn't cheer, I didn't cry. I just breathed a slow, steady breath that felt like the first real one in years. The same week, I filed for divorce. Ryan tried every tactic, begging, threatening, even sending me long messages about how I'd ruined his life. But for once, none of it had power over me. I had David's legal team behind me, and for the first time, I had something I hadn't even realized I'd lost, my own voice. I moved into a small apartment in Tampa, nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in 6 years, I decorated without asking permission. I bought a secondhand makeup chair and pulled out my old brushes from storage. They were a little worn, but when I held them, it felt like holding a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. I enrolled in evening classes to update my skills. Some nights, I came home exhausted, my hands stained with eyeshadow and foundation. But I smiled as I fell asleep because it was my choice to be tired. I even started a small social media page, posting before and after transformations. Within months, I had my first private clients. It wasn't just about makeup anymore, it was about connection. Women who came to me weren't just looking for a new look, they wanted to feel seen. And I understood that because I had spent years feeling invisible. One day, I got a call from David. We're launching a public campaign on wildlife conservation. Your story, it could help people understand why illegal trafficking is so damaging. Would you consider speaking at the opening? I hesitated, nervous about being in front of cameras. But then I thought about all the times Ryan had silenced me. Not anymore. I'll do it, I said. The event was surreal. Standing on that stage, telling my story, not as a victim, but as a woman who had finally taken her life back, was more healing than I expected. When I stepped down, the applause felt like closure, like the final lock clicking open on the cage I had lived in for too long. That night, I sat in my little apartment, the scent of setting powder and sea breeze still lingering on my clothes, and I smiled. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was free, and that freedom was worth more than anything Ryan had ever dangled in front of me. For the first time in years, I looked at my reflection and didn't see someone broken. I saw someone rebuilding, stronger than before, someone who was finally enough for herself. Months passed, and life began to feel steady again. Not exciting or dramatic, just steady. I worked in a small spa during the day and took freelance clients in the evenings. It wasn't glamorous, but every appointment, every satisfied smile from a client reminded me why I loved makeup in the first place. That's how I met Ethan Cole. He was a freelance photographer new to Tampa and came into the spa one afternoon asking if anyone could do makeup for a portfolio shoot he was putting together. "I'm trying to build a client base here," he explained, holding his camera like it was a part of him. "Weddings, graduations, that kind of thing. Do you take on freelance projects?" I almost said no out of habit. For years, I had trained myself to avoid opportunities, afraid of how Ryan would react. But Ryan was gone, and I wasn't living in his shadow anymore. So I said yes. We met the following weekend for the shoot. It was just him, me, and a college student model who needed headshots. The work felt natural. Foundation, contour, subtle highlights to catch the light just right. Ethan barely gave direction. He trusted me to do my job, and when the model looked in the mirror, she whispered, "Wow, is that me?" Ethan grinned. "You're talented, Hannah. Like, really talented." His tone was sincere, not patronizing or controlling. It startled me how refreshing that felt. One shoot turned into several. He hired me for engagement photos, then a small wedding, then referred me to one of his friends who ran a boutique clothing line. We started grabbing coffee after shoots, sometimes lunch, always talking about work at first, until one day it wasn't about work at all. He told me about growing up in Oregon, about losing his mom young, about how photography had saved him from feeling lost. I told him about Ryan, carefully at first, just fragments, but he never pushed, never judged. He simply listened. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back appointments, I came home to find a small bouquet of sunflowers sitting by my apartment door with a note. "For the days you forget how bright you are. E." I cried, but it wasn't the sad, frustrated tears I'd grown used to. These were soft tears, the kind that come when something good feels almost unreal. We didn't rush things. After years of living under control, I wasn't ready for anything fast, and Ethan seemed to understand that intuitively. He never tried to define what we were too soon, never made me feel like I had to earn his kindness. We simply enjoyed each other's company. One evening, sitting on the hood of his car watching the sun sink into the Gulf, he said, "You know, you're different when you smile like that. It's like you finally believe you deserve to." I turned to him, startled. "I'm still working on that," I admitted. He smiled softly. "Then let me remind you until you don't have to work on it anymore." That was the moment I realized healing wasn't just about leaving the bad behind. It was about letting good things in. And Ethan was good, steady, and patient enough to let me heal at my own pace. For the first time in years, love didn't feel like a cage. It felt like freedom. A year later, I stood in front of my own storefront, hands trembling not from fear, but from pride. Freedom Beauty, that was the name painted across the glass door in soft gold letters. My salon, my dream, finally breathing on its own. Inside, sunlight spilled across polish counters and rows of products I had handpicked myself. A shelf by the entrance held framed photos from my clients. Women smiling at weddings, proms, and job interviews, moments they wanted to remember because of how confident they had felt. There was one picture I always stopped at, a candid of me laughing with a teenage girl after teaching her how to do her own makeup for the first time. Her eyes were red from crying when she came in, but she left smiling. That photo reminded me why I started all of this. Ryan's shadow no longer haunted me. The divorce had finalized quietly after his court settlement, and we hadn't spoken since. I heard he'd left Florida, embarrassed and trying to rebuild his image somewhere else. Maybe he would succeed, maybe not. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My life now had new faces, new voices. Ethan was part of it, showing up after shoots with takeout when I stayed late working, always insisting on fixing that stubborn light fixture I kept ignoring. David sometimes stopped by too, mostly as a friend, to update me on the conservation campaign my testimony had supported. The illegal trafficking ring was dismantled, And because of my small role, dozens of endangered animals were safe. One evening, as I closed the shop, I caught my reflection in the glass door. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her shoulders were relaxed, her eyes bright, a soft smile curving her lips. Not because someone told her to smile, but because she genuinely wanted to. I thought about everything it took to get here. The humiliation, the betrayal, the terrifying step of saying no more. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt gratitude, not for Ryan, not for what he did, but for what I learned through surviving it. The truth is, sometimes life falls apart so completely that you can't put it back the way it was. But maybe that's the point. I wasn't meant to go back to who I was before Ryan. I was meant to grow into someone stronger, someone who refused to settle for being small and silent. As I locked up, Ethan appeared with his easy grin and a bag of dinner in hand. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, kissing my cheek. I smiled, leaning against the door. "You always seem to know." "Just paying attention," he said softly. That night, sitting at the kitchen table of our small shared home, I realized something. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, hard, and often lonely. But it's worth every step because one day you wake up and realize you aren't surviving anymore. You're living. So if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, unheard, or like you don't matter, please believe me when I say this. You do matter. You have the right to walk away from what breaks you and walk toward what makes you whole. I did, and it was the best decision I ever made.